Hello, my name is Dan Gasby, and welcome to Before I Forget, Dare to Care podcast. Today, I have a special guest because what her company, her organization did for me was life-changing. I'm with Mary Crosby, who is the CEO and president of East End Hospice. During the course of 5 years, the last 5 years of my wife's life, she was struggling with Alzheimer's, and as things progressed, it became apparent that I could not just do this all by myself. And it got to a point where I realized the end was near. And I called East End Hospice, and they made such a difference in my life, watching the process of watching your loved one, seeing your loved one really move to another place, another plane. So I wanted to have Mary here to tell us about what the EEH, the East End Hospice, does. Mary, welcome. I'm glad to have you.
Thank you for having me.
You, in your organization, I never thought about, you don't think about, obviously, that in life, people, they grow up, they get older, and ultimately, they die. And there are so many different aspects of that process that I felt compelled as something that my wife had always told me: when someone does something that makes a difference in your life, don't keep it to yourself. Tell others about it and share that experience so that they may pass the same experience on to others. But more importantly, do it because it just makes the world a better place in caring. Mary, how did you get involved with the whole notion of being in a organization that deals with end-of-life crisis?
So let me start by saying thank you for having me, and thank you for spreading the word. I think a lot of people don't know that hospice is vastly underutilized. Specifically in New York State, we rank last of all the states in the country in terms of hospice utilization.
Why?
So they don't have a full handle on why. There's actually a big research project going on right now to try to determine why that is for New York. Whether or not it's because we have a lot of cutting edge medicine here and we're very treatment focused. Maybe it's the sort of New York mentality that we're going to live forever and we're invincible. I don't know.
A doctor, I was on the board of the American Brain Foundation for almost a decade, and I never forgot what a doctor told me. He says, as people, and this is with neurodegenerative diseases, but in general, Americans tend to almost think that death is optional.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just an amazing thing. So
hospice is kind of like this, it is a little bit of an unknown secret. But I have about 100 employees, and I sit in many, many interviews, and I have to tell you that every person is called to hospice in some kind of way. It's not a nursing job you take because of the schedule or because, of the salary. Definitely, it's a calling. So for me, my calling is a story. Mm-hmm. I was working in a cancer hospital in New York City as a nurse, a new nurse, and I worked sort of in their emergency department. And it was a Sunday afternoon, and I got assigned a patient, and they told me, she's a 54-year-old woman. She has cancer, and she's no longer eligible for treatment, but she's here because she woke up and she wasn't feeling good. She lived about 2 hours outside of the city. Mm-hmm. Her husband didn't know what to do because their doctor's office wasn't open. It was a Sunday, and she was feeling kind of weak and had increased pain. So he put her in the car and he drove her all the way to this hospital where I worked. And I, went in, introduced myself. We did some blood work, some other things for her, not much.
You were brand new at this?
Yep. Okay. Halfway through my shift, I found out that it was the day of her son's wedding, and that she and her husband had missed the wedding to be here in this little emergency room behind this tiny little curtain where they were trying to FaceTime to watch the ceremony, tears streaming down their faces, missing this beautiful moment. And there was very little we could do for this woman in this situation. And I kept thinking to myself, like, it just really stuck with me, because I kept thinking, how did this happen? Like, how did we fail this woman so miserably? Like, how did she miss out on this life event to be here? You know, it really like resonated with me.
Right.
So when I'm from the East End of Long Island, I'm from Southampton, and when I moved out of the city, I saw a job listing for hospice. And I really thought about that woman. I said, what is it? And I didn't know what hospice was.
It touched you.
They don't even teach you in nursing school often. So I started thinking, like, you know, what is this? And after working at hospice, I realized if this woman had been on hospice at home, her whole care team would have known that this wedding was coming up. Her home health aide would have done her hair, got her dressed. If she was feeling weak, we would have brought her a wheelchair. Her nurse would have made sure her pain was controlled. We would have gotten her to that wedding. There's no question in my mind, because hospice is about how you are living.
Right.
Yes, it is about death and dying, but it's so much about how you're living.
So there's a difference between hospice and palliative care, and this is part of hospice, right?
Right. And so it is that pain and symptom management, but it is about making these life moments, and it's not always these big moments, right? Yes, we would have gotten that woman to the wedding. We've gotten many people to big events. We've gotten people to the beach one last time, but also it's very simple things. We ask every single one of our patients, what is something you haven't done in a while that you would like to do? What is something you've never done? How can we help you? And many times the requests are very simple. I want to sit at my table and eat dinner. I've been too sick to get out of bed or in too much pain. I'd like to take one more walk on the beach. And then the team says, all right, how do we do this?
And this is I think that's the big thing. People don't realize that hospice is not one person sitting in a room with another person who's in a bed and telling them, you know, sweet things and making them feel good and holding their hand. It's more than that.
It's more than that. And it's so much help. We would never think of the patient as just that one individual. The patient is the whole family. It's their community, whoever they are. Maybe it's their loved ones, their friends, whoever is important to them is important to us. So when we think about a hospice plan of care, it's not just for that patient, it's for everybody. How do we make this work for every person who's in this home, all the people they love, and the people those people love? It becomes this big community effort. And that's what's so beautiful about the care. It's medicine, sure, but I could hire, you know, any nurse can do the skills of nursing, taking blood or putting in a Foley catheter. When I hire people, I'm looking at their whole being.
What makes the hospice caregiver practitioner special?
I think it starts with a certain type of personality, someone who's called to the work, but then when you operate on this, you know, we like to call it the veil. Like, we are working and existing every day in this little thin kind of liminal space between this world and whatever is next.
Right.
And it changes your entire perspective on life. Because for us, death is not something hidden away or something that will happen to us in many years or may never happen, like some people think.
Yeah.
It's every day in front of us.
I was once told by a doctor that Americans have a tendency, when I was on the board of the Brain Foundation, he pulled me aside about just brain health and then ultimately dying, and he said that many people in our country think it's almost optional, like it's something that you get to choose, or you don't deal with.
Right, and just in the same way as birth and anyone who works on these kind of edges of this world, you know, it's a very sacred space and a special place, but when you remove the fear, it's beautiful, right? And just like when people are afraid when they're giving birth, when they're afraid when they're dying, it changes the whole experience. So a big part of what we do is to remove that fear by telling family members, this is normal what you're seeing. This is what death looks like. And in other countries, people always die in their homes, and the whole family is around, little kids, anyone, watching a natural death, and so it is very normal to them. But here we put people in ICUs and we hook them up to monitors and we try to keep them alive as long as possible, and that's not a natural death, and that invokes a lot of fear for people.
You know, I have to share with you that when we got the diagnosis, I was walking from Mount Sinai with my wife, and she always says, I didn't go to college, but I studied like I had a degree. And she understood what Alzheimer's was. And she also understood that there's an end. You don't get out of this. It's sort of
Right.
like the perfect storm. It won't let you out. So you've got to try to get the most out of what you're dealing with
Right.
while you're enduring it.
Yeah.
And she looked at me and she says, I know where this is going to take me. And I want you to tell the story and tell what's
Yeah.
going on. And this is why I'm so glad to have you here today. You know, it means a lot to me because as I said to you off camera, I know she's in the room.
Yeah.
I know I
Yeah.
I can feel her smile. I can feel those bright eyes.
Yeah.
And I'm so thankful that you're here. Some of your experiences, you know, you deal in a commodity that's death. What are some of the unique experiences you've encountered
Sure.
in the process?
Yeah. You know, I think like everything else, there's so many shared common experiences that people who work in this industry have. And I'm always like, we when we get into rooms, we tell stories and people are like, oh my gosh.
You know, right?
Yeah, you know. Like for example, when I started as a hospice nurse, I cared for a lot of patients who were kind of like the World War II generation. And in that generation, people didn't have the space to process trauma the way they do now, right? And it wasn't that there wasn't trauma, they just pushed it all down.
Right, suppressed it.
Right, and there are a couple themes, like things that would always revisit people in death. So one of them is the loss of a child. And back when people had bigger families and people had, you know, stillbirths and miscarriages, they weren't mourned or grieved the way that people do now. Not everyone, but you know, there's more space for that. Because if you were a woman and you lost a baby, you lost a baby. You weren't really, and if you were a man, it was almost like it wasn't acknowledged. When people were dying, and many times when I was there at the bedside of a person dying, those babies would come back,
Really?
right? So
you mean
for,
in their mind?
to them, yeah.
Right.
And so like I was standing by this man's bedside, and all of he had 5 children, and they were all at the bedside, and he was kind of in and out of consciousness. And I said to him, I was just chatting with him, and I said, now, I see you have 5 kids here, like, you know, are these all your children? And he said, no, I have 6 kids. And everybody in the room just started crying, and I thought, like, I didn't really know what was happening. And he said, there was a girl. And that's all he said, and he kind of slipped out of it. And later they told me that they had lost, his wife told me that she had lost a child in birth, and that he had never talked about that.
Wow.
Ever. In
Amazing.
his entire life. Never acknowledged that
At
child,
all.
ever. Never acknowledged the child, never spoke of it, never dealt with it. But in his death, he was reconnected somehow in that way. And even my own grandmother, when she was dying on hospice, I was pregnant. And she kept saying, the baby, the baby, the baby. And I thought she was talking about my baby, and she kept saying, the baby's not well. And I was all worried. And then I gave birth, and I put the baby in her arms. Here he is. He's perfect. He's beautiful. And then it suddenly occurred to me that she was talking about a baby she had lost, that she had told no one about except my aunt.
Wow.
And my aunt said to me, I don't think that she's talking about your baby.
So there's this connectiveness between the world we exist in
100%.
and the world they're going to that
100%.
they bring together at one point while they're still here.
And a lot of that is seeing people who are, every single hospice nurse will tell you that they've had the experience over and over again, where people see people who are deceased as they're dying, calling for them, holding out their arms, just in the room with them. That's a very common shared experience in death. So sort of like whatever you believe or not believe, it's almost like it happens too much for it not to be real, because it happens, this beautiful kind of meshing of the two worlds.
I got to tell you right now, you know, I talk about, and I had literally a perfect marriage, 28 years, no arguments, a whole host of things. We did everything
Good for
together.
you.
But today, a few minutes ago, as we were setting up, I felt her. In this house that I got for her, because she was going through this transition with Alzheimer's and escaping, I've never said to anybody, basically, she's here or that, but today, with you here and me wanting to do this so much in her honor and as homage to her, I felt her. She's in this room right now, and she was known for her smile.
Yeah.
She had an electric 100-watt smile, and that I felt her smile.
Yeah.
And tell me some more things that you've experienced like that, or you know other people have in your line of work.
I mean, and I think you think about it, right? And what is love? What is it? Is it matter? Is it a feeling? But you know when you have it, and you know when you have it in abundance and it fills up a room.
And you know when you lost it.
And you know when I lost it, but does it really go anywhere? You know, like, no, I think it's still here. That's what you're feeling. That's what this feeling, you know, and if you are open and connected to it, and again, not afraid.
Right.
You will feel it.
Is fear the biggest thing that you have to overcome in terms of getting the word out about why it's so important to be aware of hospice?
I think fear is a big part of it. I will tell you some interesting research because actually it is coming in the next couple of days. Governor Hochul is going to make medical aid in dying, which people used to call physician-assisted suicide, legal in the state of New York. Yep, in the state of New York. And I've been looking a lot into that and researching it. And one of the big things is, and you'll relate to this because of your wife's illness, that people are afraid of is the loss of autonomy.
Yeah.
You know, and it's hard for us because we can take care of your pain and your shortness of breath and your nausea and all these physical symptoms you have. But the emotional support that someone needs to be okay with losing their sort of autonomy, their dignity.
That's it.
That's hard. And when you have something like Alzheimer's, you're grieving all along the way.
Yes.
Right? Because you have this person and their whole being who you know and love, and they're losing a little bit every year, and you are grieving that loss.
Yes.
Because they are not who they were the day before. And even though I'm sure, and you can tell, I'm sure you could tell me that she was there to the very end, glimpses of who she was and who she is, right? But it's
you know what, the way she described herself was the way I felt she was to me. She said, I feel like a mirror in a frame that was broken, and the glass fell out, and then you put the pieces back in, but you never put the pieces back in as perfectly or the same, and everything you get is fractionalized.
Yeah.
And so I can relate to that so well because I see her, but it's not the same person.
It's the same.
And she's gone.
Yeah.
She's gone.
And it's a very difficult disease process.
Yeah. So Mary, this whole thing of knowing when it's time to let go, knowing when all the resources have been used, and we know that the outcome is not only inevitable, but soon. What's going on in the state, in our country in general, with assisted suicide?
So it is expected that Governor Hochul is going to sign a bill that will make what they call medical aid in dying, which some people call physician-assisted suicide or euthanasia, legal in New York State. And I've done a lot of research looking into the states where it's already legal, why people choose physician-assisted suicide or medical aid in dying, and why hospice utilization is so low. Yet this is kind of a popular option for people. And the main reason is because people's greatest fear is the loss of autonomy. So it's not that they're going to be in pain when they die. People do have that fear, but we can easily take care of that, you know, help them make sure they're not in pain. We have great advances in pain management, so that's not an issue. But we can't stop a disease process that will take someone's autonomy. As you well know with your wife, something like Alzheimer's, many neurodegenerative diseases, we haven't figured out how to slow or stop that process.
Right.
And so you are grieving these little losses every day as people lose little bits of who they were and what they can do.
I call it devolution. Like there's an evolution process in human existence. And when you see someone, especially in particular with their brain suddenly being dismantled, you can see them devolving. And it's so frustrating because, I've talked to over 50 people because we wrote a book called Before I Forget, Love, Hope, and Acceptance in Dealing with Alzheimer's. And I talk candidly about not wanting to deal with the reality of she's gone or he's gone or it's not going to get better. And I realized that at a certain point, and I listened to people who call me up and they said, she won't do this, or he doesn't do that, or I tried to teach him. I said, the teaching part is over. There is no more teaching.
Yep.
It's now a question of maintaining their dignity and maintaining your sanity.
Yep.
Because it's a time where you're saying, they call it the long gone by, but it's even more than that. It's the realization that every minute, at some point, you're going to see they're vaporizing, they're leaving,
It's hard.
And so
it's hard, and there's a lot of, in many ways, sometimes people with neurodegenerative diseases almost become childlike again, and it's almost this kind of full circle. And I remember caring for this patient, and he was actually a private chef, and his wife had Alzheimer's, and he was making her these like elaborate meals, like he would usually cook for her, beautiful, sophisticated, and it's just, he could not get her to eat.
Right.
And we said to him, try some vanilla ice cream, try some pudding.
Exactly.
This is, and she ate it right up. And it is coming back to the simple things in life a little bit in that way. But it is a grieving process, and it is a letting go process, but you don't have the full closure. Sometimes people don't feel like they can grieve, and we always tell them, oh, grieve away, cry your eyes out, because it's happening right in front of you, but it's in this slower way that's so difficult.
I would go, when we lived near the water, I would go to the beach and find a place and scream and yell.
Yeah.
Why me? Why did this have to happen to me? I had everything. We worked hard. We didn't get anything we didn't work twice as hard for. And now it's being taken away.
Yep.
And I said, this will make a pious man an atheist, and an atheist religious. And at one point, I cursed God like you couldn't believe.
Right.
And then I said to myself, okay, so now let's go back and deal with what we got to deal with. You have to get it out.
Yeah. And there's people who would say that the existence of God was in the love and the way you cared for your wife.
What do you, how do you, as a person, if I can ask this question, with all of your experience, how do you manage this process to yourself?
Well, here's what I've learned, because when I started out as a young hospice nurse, I saw a lot of things, and and again, we care for patients of all ages. We have pediatric patients. We've taken care of babies right out of the NICU who want to come home for a few days, and it was a lot, and I didn't process it kind of in real time.
See, everybody thinks hospice is someone who's up in age, and and it's their time,
right?
And they've lived a good life, or they've lived a life, and it's now. But it's more than that.
It's more than that, and we are the experts in pain and symptom management, and people bring us on board. Actually, under the Obama administration, they passed some great legislation that allows children to come on hospice while also still receiving treatments like chemotherapy and radiation, so that parents would never have to make that very difficult decision of stopping treatment that we all talk about when we think about hospice and this kind of loss of hope, and we can talk about that more, but they can have what's called concurrent care. And that's because hospice, we really are the experts in pain and symptom management, so they want children to have both. So we can come in and manage the pain while they're also getting, let's say, chemotherapy, and they don't have to make that sort of decision.
So the difference, explain to us the difference in a nutshell. What's the difference between palliative care, hospice care, and respite care?
Sure. So palliative care is a branch of medicine that focuses on pain and symptom management. Hospice is palliative care, but in the last 6 months of a person's life, which no one can truly predict, which is why when people ask me, like, what are the criteria for coming on hospice? I never say this whole prognosis of less than 6 months, because that's what sticks in people's head. And everybody has an idea about how much time someone has left on this earth. And I can tell you that doctors are notoriously bad at predicting that. Family members are a little better, but nobody really knows. Like, even us as hospice professionals, we probably have the best idea of what that time frame is like, but we don't really know.
Right.
So I always say to people, when you have a terminal illness and you are ready to focus on comfort, when you don't want to go back and forth to the hospital, to doctor's appointments, and you just want to focus, you want to spend your time doing what you want to do, you're probably ready for hospice, and you should call us and we will come and do an evaluation. And we will, provide our services, which is a whole bundle of services. And I think what I get most frustrated about is the language around death and dying in the system. So what do doctors say? They say there's nothing else we can do for you, right? Those words are uttered all the time.
Right.
There's nothing left we
Slam
can do
the
for
door.
her. This is it. Well, no, there's a lot more you can still do for this person. Maybe not, you can't cure them, but you can bring them this entire bundle of services, home health aides, pastoral care, volunteers, everything that hospice provides. It's a lot of care. And most of the homes we go in, people say, oh my gosh, I wish we had called you sooner. We should have called you months ago.
Now, let me ask you this. I have a friend whose mother was going into the terminal stages, and they didn't want, or she didn't want specifically, hospice because she felt uncomfortable about it. She felt that I'm giving up.
Yeah.
What do you tell her, but more importantly, what do you tell the person who is taking care of her, how to manage that?
Sure. I mean, we believe that we speak about hospice in the way that's most comforting to people. So they get all kinds of preconceived notions from other people, right? And it becomes this kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, because people tend to call us way too late. So then we come and they call us because someone's in pain or they're very close to death, and we give some medication and the patient dies. And then that's what people think of as hospice.
Right.
So we're always trying to say, we have patients who've been on hospice for a year, 2 years. And it's not a signal of a loss of hope, right? It's hope for something different. It's hope for more time with your family, more time in your home, more time doing the things you want to be doing, if you can, rather than going back and forth from the hospital, getting testing, especially if that's not going to help you.
Right.
That you've reached the point where those kinds of treatments are not really going to help you. How do you want to spend the time that you have left? And I think it also helps people to know that sometimes people think like, oh, once you get on hospice, like you could never come off of hospice, or it's sort of like this, like you don't have the option to unenroll or disenroll from hospice. And really, it's very simple. We've had people come on who are younger who, we had a 26-year-old.
Wow.
And her goal
Amazing.
was to get her pain under control so she could seek a new treatment for her cancer.
Right.
So she came into our inpatient hospice facility, we got her pain under control, and she went and got on a clinical trial for her cancer. So you can come on and off the program.
I would never think, and I know most people, they think that it's, that's it.
Right. And for a lot of people it is. But
Right.
again, like if a new treatment becomes available and you want to sign off of hospice, it's a simple conversation.
Right.
We're not trying to keep people enrolled in a program they don't want to be on, but I think the real issue is there's so many people who are not getting the service who need it. And that's what I'm always, people always say, well, how could you possibly get more people? If you're dying, you're going to be on hospice. And I'm always saying that, but that's not true. So many people are dying without hospice.
Right.
And that's who we're trying to reach.
And in this effort to reach people, what else do you see we could do to let people, how do we demystify hospice?
I think there are a couple of ways. Well, one, this type of thing is fantastic, right? Because it just gets the word out. Word of mouth is the best way to get the information out there, especially in communities like the East End, we find.
Right.
So one of the things that's incredible, I think, about East End Hospice is we're nationally recognized by Medicare as one of the best hospices in the country. So we have 5 out of 5 stars, which is the highest ranking you can get for the quality of care we provide. And we're this small, independent, kind of bootstrappy
Right.
hospice.
No.
We're not connected to any larger healthcare agency, which is, I mean, pretty much everyone's a part of a system now, one of the
Right.
big systems.
What was the genesis of how did East End Hospice as a care alternative come into existence?
Right out of the community. So it was literally neighbors saying to neighbors, people are dying and they just, we need more help out here. We're kind of disconnected from the larger healthcare systems of New York City. We need help for people who want to die at home, for people who have terminal illnesses. And it was a group of people who started it, super grassroots. They teamed up with another group from the North Fork and became East End Hospice. And now we're approaching our 35th year. And we're just, we're out here doing this. We're a nonprofit. We rely heavily on fundraising because we don't have the purchasing power of a larger healthcare system, but we provide exceptional care. So, and it's all through this kind of like word of mouth that people know about us. We don't have some big advertising budget.
Right.
We're not slapping our logo all over billboards. We're just, out here telling people about what we do, and that's so helpful. But I think that some of the demystifying things, a lot of it is people always say, oh, the morphine, you have to, as soon as you come on hospice, they give you morphine and it kills you and it hastens your death. And people have a lot of fear around morphine, which is interesting because it's just one of many opiates and
Right.
there's other medications we can use. And we don't have to use any medications at all. There are many patients who don't use a single medication on our program. And in fact, one of the big things we do is we help people kind of streamline their meds if they want to, right? So let's take you off some of these meds you don't even remember why you were put on, because everyone's got polypharmacy going on. And and oftentimes they feel so much better when we reduce their meds to just what we think they really need in
Right.
that time. And we don't have to give any medications. There's no protocol of, oh, you come on hospice and you need to take morphine. It's all based on the symptoms the patients are experiencing. And so there's a big fear around that,
Right.
I think.
Where do you see hospice going in terms of its acceptance in America?
Well, I hope it will be more accepted. I think the boomer generation is a very different generation from, World War II generation and older generations. I think people are more inclined now to do kind of their own research, for
Right.
better or worse.
The greatest generation, they held everything in, right? And and to show weakness or to show loss was almost considered a sign of giving up,
Right.
right?
They also had, not everyone, but there was a sort of trust in the medical system. And not that I think people should necessarily distrust the medical system, but I think your doctor, your oncologist is probably always going to tell you to keep going with treatment, and there's a new treatment, and you could, but people are now more inclined to say, okay, but is it going to work? And what is the quality of my life going to be? What are the side effects going to be? I do think people are kind of taking their health into their own hands.
Right.
And I think that will lead to more acceptance of hospice.
Does your local insurance provider or Medicare or Medicaid provide assistance in allowing you to get those types of claims met?
Yes. So the hospice benefit was sort of established in, I believe that it was the 80s. And it is a Medicare benefit. So anyone who has Medicare has coverage for hospice. Most of the commercial insurances kind of follow similarly to what Medicare does, and Medicaid as well. At East End Hospice, I always tell everyone, we have a billing department of 1, and the insurance is the last thing we check. We take every patient, whether you have no insurance, underinsured, we'll never deny anybody our care. So it's kind of an afterthought. We hired someone who comes from big for-profit hospice in New York City, and she said, well, we can't go out there and bring this patient on program. We haven't even checked the insurance. I said, oh, we'll check it later. But everybody has a benefit for hospice who has Medicare, and that covers about 80% of the care we provide,
Right.
and the rest is fundraising.
I didn't know that was part of your mantra, but I only knew at the end of my, literally, I don't have any hair, but I was pulling my hair. I was pulling what little I had, the nubs or stubs, whatever you want to call it. I was so relieved to just see people come in and smile and talk to me, because I think hospice is as much for the caregiver
100%.
as it for the person who is
Yeah.
being cared for.
Yeah.
What points do you think we need to constantly reinforce about hospice and caregiving and where we should go as we progress in terms of realizing that, particularly with the largest population in demographically in our country,
Yeah.
the baby boomers. I'm a baby boomer. What can we get out to them, to us, to even me now, that we need to do to make this understandable and palatable to the circle of life?
Yeah. I think more broadly, yes, it's this acceptance of death that we've talked about as a culture. You know, how do we make, it seems like most of what we do in this country is sort of anti-aging,
Yeah.
anti-death, right? That's a
Right.
bigger question. On a more local level, getting the word out about what we do. And as you've mentioned, talking about what we do for caregivers and families is super important. There have been so many studies that have shown that if you had to pay people for the amount of hours they're providing in caregiving for loved ones, I mean, it's a whole economy in and of itself. There are just people in every home in every town in America caring for a loved one, not getting paid.
That's the big thing.
Hours
Yeah.
and hours, having to
Right.
leave their job or leave what they normally do to caregive. It's astounding. And there have been some creative changes in Medicaid where you can apply for a family member to actually get reimbursed for caring for a loved one, but the emotional and physical toll. There was a study recently that showed that caregiving actually had measurable detrimental effects on the person's health who is the caregiver.
Right.
So they forego doctor's appointments, they don't get their own health checked out, they don't have time to focus on themselves, right? So a big part of what hospice does is to say, let us take some of that burden.
Is that respite care for the person that's caring? Because my understanding is that when people who are taking care of people who can no longer take care of themselves, that they get sicker sooner.
Yeah.
If they get hurt, they don't, get well faster. It's actually a slower process.
Absolutely.
And in some cases, those people even can predecease the person that is in hospice or needs care. Is that true?
That's absolutely true. And then there's also the some people's identity becomes all consumed with caring for this person in their life who they love, so that when the person dies, they almost don't even know who they are anymore. We've had this experience where, with a patient recently, where we said, what are you going to do next? I don't even know. I don't even know what I like to do anymore.
Right.
I don't even know what brings me joy anymore, because I've been so all consumed in just caring for this person.
I went through that experience, especially when you and your partner, your wife, your other half is suddenly not there.
Yeah.
I mean, because you absorb everything and you become two as one, but that other one is not there. So everything is lived for what they need, and you don't live for what you either need or want.
Right, absolutely. And so to talk a little bit about respite, so the Medicare benefit allows a patient to have 5 days a month of respite care, where they can come to our inpatient hospice facility, which is in West Hampton, and we'll care for them for 5 days.
So let me get this right. So what you're saying is, at the EEH, the East End Hospice, you can bring the person who is in
They have to be on hospice.
in
They have a
hospice,
terminal illness.
from away from their wherever they were to actually where they come to your facility
Correct.
to give
The caregiver break.
Wow, did not know that.
Yep. So that is used a lot for people who, for a lot of different reasons. Sometimes there'll be like a big family wedding coming and the patient cannot travel. Sometimes there'll be a health crisis. You have a 90-year-old taking care of another 90-year-old and one gets sick who's the caregiver and we have to move the patient into the facility. So we use respite for all kinds of things, but it is mostly taken advantage of by, most people who use it have family members who have neurodegenerative diseases because they're the most, that caregiving is like,
oh, it's all
I mean, you
encompassing.
can't imagine it until you have to do it.
No one understands what, frontal temporal lobe or Lewy body or all the forms of dementia, Alzheimer's and Parkinson's that evolves into Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
They're not there.
Right. And we talk a lot about caring for the whole family because you get into these situations where, let's say someone has Parkinson's and their Parkinson's, their neurologist is saying, it's very, very important that he continues with the speech therapy and the occupational therapy, right? And the disease is progressing. And, we come in, they're just at their wit's end caring for this person. And we come in and we say, okay, well, tell me what your life is like. What's happening? Well, it takes me 3 hours to get him into the car to take him to his speech therapy. Okay, how much do you think the speech therapy is helping? Well, I don't really notice a difference.
Right.
So we need to talk about what works for this whole family. Maybe the speech therapy is making the speech, I would say making it so that it's not getting worse as fast, or the occupational therapy is helping a little bit.
Right.
But overall, what kind of burden is it placing on the whole family? Is it that much improvement that it's worth this 6-hour process of trying to get someone in the car, and then he falls, and then you have another injury?
Right.
And so we're always trying to talk to people about the whole picture. What does it look like for your life as the caregiver? What does it look like for his life as the patient? How hard is it for him to get in the car? How much does it take out of him? He could spend those 6 hours sitting around a table with his family talking.
Right.
Rather than going through this process. So it's all this kind of, but on the medical side of things, they're not going to say that. They're going to say, keep going with the speech therapy. Oh, you can still get them there? Great. Keep going with that. That's the only way to slow the progression. Keep going with this. But you're fighting a battle that you can't win. Right. And I don't even like the analogy of the battle. I wrote a piece for my alumni magazine at the college I went to about how I think it's a dance. Right. It's not a battle, because if you set up the analogy of fighting disease, then you lend yourself to the I lost when you give up.
Well,
right?
Yeah, in a fight, there's either a winner or a loser.
Yeah, right. And so if it's always fighting disease, then we're always losing or winning. Whereas if this disease is just something we're dancing with, we're living with, but it's not us, it doesn't consume us, we're not fighting it, we're just living our best life with it,
through it, right.
Then it's a different analogy. And I think that's an important distinction.
Mary, the reason I wanted you to be here is because of your expertise and understanding about what so many people have gone through, but even more importantly, what my generation, the baby boomers, every day 10,000 people are turning 65. The inevitability of the fact that every 6 seconds, someone's being diagnosed with some form of dementia, especially Alzheimer's. And that necessitates the reality that there is going to come a time when they have to say goodbye.
Yeah.
I wanted you to let people know in honor of what my wife always believed, and that was do some good. Yeah. Tell somebody about something that can make a difference in their lives before it becomes a situation that you have to deal with. Let them know. And that's why it's so important for me to have you here today in this environment to share. And it's also cathartic for me because I promised her, I said, she said to me, as I mentioned earlier, we walked away from her diagnosis of Alzheimer's from Mount Sinai from 103rd, 104th, and 5th Avenue. I'll never forget it. And we got right to where the Jewish Museum was. And she looked me straight in the eye and she says, "Dad, I know where it's going to take me. I know what's going to happen. I'm not afraid of it. I want you to tell my story and not to let anyone else, because they'll never tell it the way it should be told." And that's why I'm glad you're here today, because she would have wanted me to tell this story about the transition, the evolution or devolution of what she went through, so that others know this is what they can expect. And if they're aware, I think they can mitigate to a great degree the big F word, fear.
Yeah.
Because fear is the thing that keeps people from growing or evolving or
right.
managing what you're inevitably going to have to deal with.
Right. And I you're exactly right. I think it's removing the fear and going a step further to empower people, because you are, as you come to the end of your life, especially in this country, you are working against a system, and you have to advocate for yourself. And it's not so much that people...
Why do we have to do that?
I know. You wouldn't think so, right? But there are all these forces behind the medical system, which is so oriented towards treatment and also so fractured into, your doctor for this body part and your doctor for that body system, and, none of them speak to each other. And you do have to kind of step outside of all of that for yourself and for your loved ones, and think about the big picture, because the medical system isn't going to think about you that way until you get to, and it's a shame, until you get to a place like hospice where you have this interdisciplinary team who's looking at the whole big picture to figure out, how do you want to spend this time? What makes you most comfortable? But you have to, if you just kind of go along with what's happening, you'll be offered treatment upon treatment upon treatment until you say, you know what, I don't want to spend my time doing this anymore. Or maybe you do, and that's an individual choice that each person has to kind of face. But I think that, again, it is empowering people to take their health into their own hands, to make decisions that sometimes maybe feel like they're going against
the grain.
Yeah, or even what their doctor is telling them. I remember I had this young patient. She was 45, but she was super evolved and very comfortable with her own death, and she had a type of leukemia, and she did treatment, and it was successful, but then it came back. And they said to her, okay, well, your options are between these two different chemotherapies. One is much stronger than the other and has terrible side effects, or you could do this other chemotherapy. And she said, there is a third choice. And the doctor said, what's the third choice? And she said, do nothing at all. Go home and be with my family. And he was like appalled. She was young. Why wouldn't you take every single treatment, even if the side effects are horrible and the chances of survival are very low? And that's what she did. She came onto hospice. She was my patient. She wrote a book of poetry in the year and a half that she was on hospice.
Amazing. Wow.
She saw all the people she wanted to see. She lived life exactly how she wanted to. But she had to kind of stand up to her doctor. And because to him, there wasn't a third choice. It was this chemo or this other stronger chemo.
It was binary.
That's it.
Right.
And so, we have to educate people, empower them.
Mary, it's been a pleasure having you today, and I've learned so much about what I have been immersed in for the last 5 years since my wife passed. You're the expert. Tell me in words that the audience and that I need to know, where and what can we do in a perfect world to make this more available to people, to understand hospice and not be afraid of it?
Yeah. I think one of the best things that people can do is actually talk to their own families about what their wishes are. There's still so many people who don't have advance directives or living wills that kind of say how they picture their own end of life. And it's a hard conversation, but it's honestly easier to have when you're not sick, right? When it's just kind of a theoretical.
It's sort of like when you go shopping, don't go shopping hungry.
When you're hungry,
right?
Right. So there's a lot of emotion once you have a diagnosis, but when you're just sitting around a table, my family makes fun of me because we'll be at Thanksgiving and I'm like, who has a healthcare proxy?
Right.
Like who, because I want to make sure that I know what my family members would want and what they wouldn't want. And that's the best gift you can give someone.
Absolutely.
Because that paves the way. We're all going there, right? We're not getting out of this alive.
Absolutely.
So,
you know what my father once told me? He said, boy, and he always called me boy. He says, you know, it can't be that big of a deal if everybody could do it.
right, exactly.
You know, I mean,
right.
you have to have, you could call it gallows humor, you could call it whatever you want, but you got to understand.
It's a shared human experience.
It's an experience that we all walk.
Right,
and so
right.
it's natural.
So let's walk it together,
Yeah,
right? Call hospice so that we can all walk it together, so that we can provide you with all the support you need medically, spiritually,
Right.
emotionally, to get through this time. And then after your loved one dies, hospice, we don't just disappear. We call for over a year.
Yes,
Cards,
you
calls,
called
bereavement support.
not your people called, and that's why I wanted to do this. You know, if I'm not known for anything else, I did what she would have wanted me to do as an act of love for her, so that other people know it's okay and it's gonna be okay.
Yeah, and what an impact. So that's her legacy, and it'll be yours too.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
Mary,
thanks for having me.
I am so glad you're the best.
Thank
you.
you.
You know, if you need me, I'm there for East End Hospice.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.